And we have turned. Welcome back to the stream, everybody. That was Killing Two Birds off of the Hat in Time soundtrack. Which, yeah, it's a great damn tune. See, I know I said I was basically done with Hat in Time, and I probably wasn't going to stream it again because I decided to myself, you know what, Death Wish seems like it's more difficult for too difficult for someone like me who is not fantastic at platforms, you know? Well, sometimes I'm good, sometimes I'm good. But the thing I've learned is that I got the soundtrack for Hat in Time when I bought it, of course. One thing I didn't realize is that I completely forgot to install, like, it's a Miller. Okay, whatever. I'll deal with him later. But, there's an entire other side to the Hat in Time soundtrack that I got just for getting the DLC. And, forgot it was there. Didn't even realize it was there. So I installed that, and that particular song is the Death Wish version of fighting Conductor and DJ Grooves, you know, the two bird directors. Which is why I love that the song is called Killing Two Birds. But, apparently what it is in that boss fight is because, you know, how it worked in the base game itself. It was like, depending on which one you helped in the, in the film competition, you fought one of them and the other helped you out. Yeah, in the Death Wish version, you fight both of them at the same time. And the funny thing about that is, Conductor or DJ Grooves, whichever one you have to fight in the base game, they have more health than any other boss in the game by far. I think it takes like 30 hits to take them down. Next closest to them is maybe 10. So you have to do that, except twice, while both of them are fighting you at the same time. Damn killer track, though. Love it. I've been listening to that specific song all week. Hello, Rolls. Welcome back to the stream. Hopefully you're having a lovely day. But yeah, here we are. And we are going to finally get back to some more Yakuza if the capture card works. I tested it before I started, and it seems like it works fine. Okay, so we'll see how it goes. It's going to be real fun to see how I play Yakuza, because I haven't played it in several months. I think since September might have been the last time I played it. There's going to be a bit of a learning curve trying to get back into it. I think I'm more than halfway through the story now, but I can't remember. However, before we get back to it, it's been a long time since I've had myself a little ramble before stream, and there's a few things, I suppose, that have come to my attention that I would like to talk about. I'm not going to hit all of them right now, because I would like to actually, you know, play video games as opposed to talking directly to camera. One thing I do know that a lot of people have talked about in the past week is, well, I mean, it's been nearly 2 weeks since I streamed, the Video Game Awards, or whatever the hell it's called. That happened not long. And there was some stuff that happened there, and the thing I'm most interested in is, like, things that were announced. Because, I'll be honest, 9 times out of 10, I don't really care about the Game Awards. But I'm not going to get into that right now. I should have a couple of chances to stream this weekend, so I'll deal with all that later, talk about my thoughts on that afterwards. One thing I'm also not going to get into too much right now, but I will mention it, is that Project Zomboid is a game that I started playing again over this past week. You know, because diving into something else that is real nitpicky, technically has no end state, and can last forever is such a great idea now, isn't it? But, the long-awaited Build 42 of Project Zomboid was finally released this past week. Now, it's released in an unstable branch, it's not the legit update yet. But I updated it to that, played a little bit of it. It is a wildly different game because of it. Well, not wildly, but like, they've overhauled certain areas. Like, I started in Muldraw, like the original starting town, because they did specifically redo a number of the buildings there, so that's interesting. Zombie behavior is different. The traits work differently. They've added several more options in terms of, like, agriculture, and you can now raise animals. They've physically added animals to the game, so there's some wild animals running around, and you can domesticate certain animals. That's something that you can't really get into until later in the game. I have not come anywhere near to that. The crafting system's completely overhauled. You can build stuff from scratch now, basically. Like, you can make forges and shit. So all that is pretty interesting. I've found it very difficult to get back into the swing of it because even though I don't play with a lot of mods in that game, now of course the unstable branch of it, like the mods and the multiplayer, have been disabled. Makes sense. They're trying to test the base game to see if it works or not. I don't play with a lot of mods, but it's very difficult getting into it without the quality of life ones that I did have installed. Specifically, the one I'm thinking about is there was a mod I installed that had it so that you could use stuff in the containers and it would automatically be sorted back into the containers after you were done. So basically, like, if you have a bunch of food items in, like, the fridge or some surrounding cupboards, you can select a recipe in a menu, and your character would automatically take that stuff out, prepare it, and then put the stuff they didn't use back. Yeah, base game doesn't do that. That was a mod. So I had an instance where I was running around, my character got a little hungry, found a tub of ice cream in a freezer. So I ate half of it and went about my business. Spent the whole day scavenging, came right to the end of the day, discovered that I had half a tub of melted ice cream in my inventory because it didn't automatically get put back. You need to physically do it yourself. So that's a thing I'm going to have to keep in mind. But yeah, anyway. Point is, even though I really shouldn't, sometime I am going to start streaming Zomboid again just so I can stream a little bit of the new build. Now, I doubt that's going to happen anytime before the new year, because I've only got this weekend to stream, and then that's it. Because I'm going out of town next week, and I'm not going to be back again until the new year. So, yeah, no, I don't think I want to start something technically new in that time frame. Well, I got so many other things on the go. But so far, my impression of Build 42 is it's pretty neat. I've clearly not seen anywhere near the amount of new stuff it has to offer, but we'll get into it when I actually start streaming it again here. The only other thing I can think of I'd like to have a little chat about before I begin Yakuza, and maybe some Kenshi, I'm hoping to get into some of that too, because I've been itching to get back to it, is one thing that was announced, well, I mean, it was announced ages ago, but the trailer for it was released yesterday, is they released a trailer for the new Superman movie. And I watched it and was surprisingly excited. Because, I mean, I don't know. This is probably going to require some explanation. See, I haven't read a lot of newer comic books lately, but I do love comics, you know, like, I mean, and practically anything. If it's interesting enough to me, I'll read. And of course, you know, the superheroes are the old standbys, the big two, Marvel and DC, though I was always more of a DC fan, mostly because of Batman, but then I branched out to other things. And I know DC has not been doing so hot in the movie sphere for things, you know. It seems like they're trying to haul their fortunes back, and they're completely restructuring the way that they do their live-action movies. And this Superman one is essentially the first one of this new franchise that they're going to do. Well, I say technically because some of the previous stuff still counts. The most recent Suicide Squad movie apparently is partially still canon. So is the Peacemaker TV show that spun off from that. It seems like they're playing fast and loose, kind of a broad strokes with the way the story is going to go. And technically it's already started, because there was an animated series called Creature Commandos, which is technically the first thing in this. I haven't watched any of it yet, but I've heard good things. But anyway, one thing I will say is that, well, basically any interpretation of any of these characters, in my opinion, is fair game. Even if I don't agree with it, even if I don't particularly like it, if you think about it, especially a lot of the really big superheroes, they've been around for nearly a century now. I think Batman's coming up on his 90th anniversary soon. I think he's at like 85, perhaps, something like, I don't know, it was 1939, I think he was introduced, so you do the math on that one yourself. This week has turned my brain to mush, so I can't. So, like, you've got characters who have been around for the better part of a century, and they've changed so much over the course of all that time. So it's like, you know what? Any interpretation is fine. You go nuts. Whether I personally like the interpretation or not is up for debate. But, something I'm kind of sick of. Now, like I've said, Batman is probably my favorite of the traditional superhero characters. I feel like we're kind of coming away from the trend of depicting Batman that I really hated. And that was the thing that he kind of became a meme in like the 2010s, especially. At least that's what I recall, but it's probably a thing that's been ongoing forever. And the whole thing with Batman is that he's always put up as being like this super badass who can defeat anything. And it was like, okay, I kind of like that sometimes when that sort of story is used correctly. But like, it always comes down to it nowadays. It's like, no, obviously he's going to beat everybody. And like, he's just this super badass who's completely infallible. That's not really the kind of Batman I like. I like the fact, I don't know, I like either the really goofy Batman stories, like the old Adam West TV show or the Brave and the Bold cartoon that came out in the early 2000s, or what I would consider to be a more realistic depiction of the character, which is he's just a guy. He's a highly trained guy, he's a rich guy, but he's just a guy, and he's not perfect, and he's suffering from massive trauma. So I like a Batman that makes mistakes. I like a Batman that takes losses, you know? What does this have to do with Superman, you ask? Because that's how I started this. Well, I find the same thing with Superman. Because the reason why I'm not as big of a fan of Superman isn't really so much that I don't like the character, it's just that it's very rare, especially in the modern era, that the character gets used in any way I would consider interesting. Especially in the last little bit, it seems like the typical trend is to depict the character as like, oh yeah, what if Superman but he's edgy? What if Superman but like he's really dark? What if Superman except he goes bad, like the evil Superman? And I mean, you get that from The Boys, which has been fairly popular. It's now ending soon. I think the next season is their final season, which I'm honestly not much of a fan of The Boys. I don't know why, it just never really struck me as all that great. For my money, if you want a really good what if evil Superman story, Mark Waid's Irredeemable. That was the better one. And I mean, it's not actually Superman. If you want like Superman himself being evil, the Injustice series is probably pretty good for that. But I don't know, these are pretty good as one-offs, but I feel like especially like the last 10 years or so, they've been really making Superman as this really like tortured, dangerous character. And I mean, he is dangerous. He's one of the most powerful creatures in existence. But he's always been meant to be this guy who brings hope and optimism. And I feel like that's like the humanity of this inherently inhuman character is something that people keep forgetting about. And how this swings back to the trailer for the new movie, it looks like they finally friggin' remembered that he's supposed to be like the world's biggest Boy Scout. He's supposed to be a good guy, you know? So the trailer itself is really uplifting, and it, like, I don't know. Even though it starts with him having the shit kicked out of him and he's down in the dirt. But like, they really make him seem like he's this beacon of hope again, and I'm kind of excited to see that. And one thing that's kind of cool that it looks like in the trailer, which I'm kind of wary of if it's done incorrectly, because this is the thing that tanked the Batman movies from the 90s, they seem to have a pile of characters thrown into it. Like, for a start, one thing I do love it for is goddamn Crypto the Super Dog as a character in it, so there's that. But it looks like there's a bunch of heroes that pop up in it too, because in the trailer you can see Hawk Girl, Metamorpho, Mr. Terrific, which is neat because he's a character who hardly ever gets used. Green Lantern, but specifically the Guy Gardner version of Green Lantern. So, you know, the asshole Green Lantern. And he even has his stupid bowl cut that he usually has. And he's played by Nathan Fillion, of all people. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting that they have all these characters in there. I'm kind of wary on how that might affect the movie. What I'm hoping is that they treat it the same way as the Justice League cartoon that came out in the mid 2000s, because they had all kinds of crazy characters like pulled from the depths of DC continuity that they put in that show, but they hardly ever like gave an origin story for any of them. It's like, no, these are just people who live in this universe and they're just doing what they do. So I kind of hope that that's what they're doing. They're not like doing this meticulous, we need to drill down on every explanation for every character. They're like, no, this is just the world we're dropping you in. These people already exist. You don't need any explanation as to why they're there. They're just there, you know? And I kind of hope that's the route they go, because that way they won't get bogged down trying to explain every little detail. And, not to throw shade at the competition, but I feel like that would really help them stand out from the Marvel movies, because while I do like a number of the Marvel movies, I've also gotten very sick of them lately. Well, not even sick, I just don't have any interest anymore. Because it's like, I watch everything up to the big build up to like the ending of the Infinity Saga, and then after that I was like, I don't really, care about any of the other stuff that's happening. Some of the movies have been pretty good. I mean, Deadpool and Wolverine was good. The most recent Spider-Man movie was good, but it was like, I'm not invested in watching every single one of these things anymore. Also because I simply don't have the time. But no, I really hope that they remember that comic book movies are supposed to be fun. I think that's the trend they're trying to go for with this. Like, they're embracing the inherent silliness of it and not trying to like smooth it over and make it more realistic or serious. Probably the biggest thing that's emblematic of that is they're actually using an older version of the Superman costume. Like, it just looks like an older version of it. He has the goddamn red underwear again. And I remember reading in an interview, and this is just going to be a random anecdote that I read. They interviewed, they had a Q&A with like the cast and crew of the movie, and James Gunn, the guy who did like the most recent Suicide Squad movie, he did Guardians for Marvel. He's basically the overarching guy in charge of DC's stuff now, and he was the director of Superman. And apparently they apparently had a giant debate about whether they were going to give Superman the red underwear, because he was like, yeah, I don't know, I was really anti red underwear camp. Because he was talking about how Zack Snyder tried thousands of variations of it to see if he could get it to work, and he couldn't. And he was saying, it's like, okay, we're gonna try a few different designs, see if it takes. So he tries a few different things, and he sees David, I'm gonna mispronounce his last name, Cornsfoot, I believe is how his last name maybe is pronounced. The guy who's playing Superman sees him in full costume, and he's still not sure about it, because it's like he thinks it looks a bit silly. But then the guy who plays Superman apparently gave him the perfect explanation as to why he would look like that, and he was like, well, I mean, of course he looks a little bit silly, he says. Because it's like, he's a super powerful alien from another planet. He just doesn't want children to be afraid of him. And Gunn was like, no, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. He does want to look as non-threatening as possible. He's dressed up as a goddamn professional wrestler, essentially. I was like, yeah, because, people need to remember Superman is the good guy. He's supposed to be this friendly, approachable guy, despite the fact that he can explode planets if he wanted to, So, I don't know. As with many things, I'm going to approach it with caution. But I'm rather optimistic about it. And, well, certainly they really hit all the nostalgia buttons, seeing as how they used the old score from the Richard Donner Superman. Just like an updated electric guitar version of it. So yeah, I don't know. It could be good. I'm hoping it's good. I really am. And, what was the other thing? I was going to say something else about that. Oh yeah, the guy that's playing Lex Luthor in that is Nicholas Hoult, and I'm kind of excited for that, because I've loved him in practically everything I've seen him in. Mad Max Fury Road, I think, is the first thing I saw him in. He was Nux, the war boy. So he was in that. He was in that weird zombie romance, Warm Bodies. He was in Renfield, which did not do very well when it came out, but I loved it. He's a large part of the reason why I loved it. Him and Nicolas Cage, let's be honest. But no, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm looking forward to that movie coming out. And I think that might be all I really need to say about that. Oh, one thing I will say though is they've kind of announced a couple of the other DC movies that are coming out. And aside from, like, I think there's going to be another Batman movie coming out at some point. I think they're specifically going to do like a dynamic duo thing with Robin. There's another Wonder Woman movie coming out down the line. But before a number of these things, completely out of the blue, they're doing a standalone Clayface movie. Yeah, the Batman villain. And not only is it a standalone Clayface movie, he's not directing it because he had scheduling conflicts, but the script is being written by this guy, Mike Flanagan. And if you're not familiar with Flanagan, Flanagan is mostly known for horror. He made a pile of well-regarded horror miniseries for Netflix. He's the guy who did Haunting a Hill House and Haunting of Bly Manor, Midnight Mass, Fall of the House of Usher. He did those things. So I'm just thinking to myself, yes, I feel like you can make a Clayface movie a horror movie. And this takes me back to something I said years ago when me and a buddy were spitballing about how DC could do something different than Marvel. And it's like, a comic book movie doesn't necessarily need to be like your stereotypical superhero action movie. It doesn't need to be. And two of the ideas we spitballed were, number one, an Ocean's 11 style heist movie involving the Birds of Prey. Now, we did get a Birds of Prey movie afterwards, but it wasn't quite that. Because it was like, yeah, you've got Oracle as like their organizer, and then you've got characters like Black Canary, Huntress, maybe Renee Montoya, people like that. And they're trying to stop, I don't know, the goddamn Riddler from pulling a casino heist or something, I don't know. It's like, so yeah, it'd be a heist movie. And the other idea we spitballed was just a straight-up horror movie. Now, the character I suggested for that was Solomon Grundy, but I'll take Clayface. Clayface fits too. But yeah, anyway. Now, I've rambled long enough about all of that. That's just my thoughts on the state of all that, and just, I'm kind of approaching it with cautious optimism.